Are you commuting to work, heading to the gym, or just taking a study break? Perfect, because in the next few minutes, you'll understand one of the smartest costing techniques in management accounting: life cycle costing.
Welcome back to the deep dive. Today, we are diving into something really essential for any performance management student. We're talking about truly getting to grips with the logic and, the strategic side of life cycle costing, or LCC.
Yeah, it's more than just another costing method, isn't it?
Absolutely. It's a fundamental shift, really, a
Yeah.
change in mindset for managers, moving away from just looking at short-term results
Right.
towards, well, planning for profitability over the long haul.
It's like the difference between checking your bank balance today versus figuring out your net worth over the next, say, 10 years.
Mhm.
If you're a manager and your job is maximizing shareholder wealth, you can't base big multi-year decisions on like a single quarter's data. That's the core issue, isn't it? Let's unpack that. What's the real danger of sticking to traditional costing? Why does relying on these sort of short arbitrary periods, a month, a quarter, why does that lead to bad strategic choices?
Well, it creates this massive blind spot, a real financial blindness, especially, at the beginning and the very end of a product's life.
Okay.
Traditional systems, they're pretty good at tracking the day-to-day stuff, the operational costs, what we call incurred costs, things like wages this month or materials used.
Right, the routine stuff.
Exactly. But they completely fail, really, when it comes to strategically handling those big fixed costs, things like product development or getting rid of the product at the end. They don't link those costs properly to the units that actually benefited from them over time.
So, when a product is just starting out in that development phase, you've got huge expenses, right?
Yeah.
Design, research,
A big
testing.
mess of costs.
If you judge that phase purely on its own, using traditional methods, it looks like a complete financial disaster.
Precisely. You use a simple profit formula for that period, revenue minus cost. Well, the cost is sky high. Revenue is basically zero. And boom, you get this huge loss. It flags the product as an immediate failure. A manager focused only on the short term might just pull the plug right there.
Killing something potentially great in the long run.
Exactly. Just because the accounting system, well, it forced them to look at it the wrong way.
Yeah.
LCC fixes that. It forces us, compels us really, to look at the entire financial journey of the product.
Okay, so that leads us nicely into defining it properly. Life cycle costing, it moves beyond the immediate snapshot. It demands that management identifies, estimates, and, crucially, tracks costs across all the phases of a product's existence.
Yeah, we're talking about a really comprehensive view, cradle-to-grave accounting. The core goal is quite rigorous. You accumulate all the costs, everything, from the very first idea through design, production, marketing, customer support, right up until you dispose of the very last unit. You gather all that cost over the entire estimated life. Then you take that total lifetime cost and you divide it by the total estimated lifetime sales volume. That gives you the true comprehensive profit picture per unit.
That's a really crucial distinction, isn't it? It sets LCC apart from maybe just using a more detailed method like activity-based costing or ABC. ABC helps refine how we track overheads during manufacturing.
Right, within a period.
But LCC changes the whole timeline. It forces us to bring in costs from way before manufacturing starts and way after it ends, sometimes years later.
That's a really key insight.
Yeah.
LCC is fundamentally strategic. It's a tool for planning, for investment appraisal. Whereas ABC, well, that's more of a management tool for operational cost control and pricing, usually in the shorter term.
Right.
They're not usually exclusive, though. You can use both. LCC gives you the big strategic picture, the long view, and ABC helps make sure the costs within that manufacturing phase are allocated accurately.
Okay, that makes sense. Let's move on to the life cycle itself then, because you can't really manage the costs if you don't understand the typical rhythm of a product's life. We need to think of this as a sort of journey, maybe like a 5-act play,
That's a great analogy.
where the focus, the financial risk, they change quite dramatically from one act to the next.
And understanding these standard stages is, well, it's vital for performance management students. It gives you a framework for analyzing any product situation. So, Act 1, development. This is before the launch. It's the big initial investment phase,
Right.
characterized by really high costs, usually fixed non-recurring costs. Things like patents, R&D salaries, market research, initial design work, prototyping, maybe setting up a pilot production line.
And crucially, zero revenue, or maybe tiny amounts. In the example we're looking at, those design and development costs might be, what, $60,000 up front? So this stage is designed to be a loss maker initially. What's the main focus for managers here?
It's really about risk management and feasibility. They're asking, can we actually design something that works? Can we do it fast enough? And critically, can we design it cheaply enough to eventually hit our target cost for the market? Because if we spend, say, 6 months too long stuck in development, that's 6 months of lost sales opportunities down the line.
Yeah.
And that directly impacts the total life cycle calculation.
Okay. Development's done. We move to Act 2, introduction. Product hits the shelves. Sales start trickling in, but usually slowly at first, right?
Yeah, typically slow, which means you need high marketing spend, lots of promotion to build awareness, get it into distribution channels.
Right.
And unit costs are often still quite high here. Why? Well, you haven't hit economies of scale yet, and you're still figuring things out. The learning curve effect. Workers, machines, everyone's getting used to the process. So, profitability. Still low, often still negative if you look at the cumulative picture, because the sales haven't generated enough contribution yet to cover that big development cost from Act 1.
Okay, then things hopefully pick up. Act 3, growth. This is the acceleration phase.
Exactly. Sales volumes shoot up. The market accepts the product. Maybe you get network effects, or you can lower the price a bit. Revenue starts climbing sharply.
And the costs.
This is the key financial leverage point. Costs tend to stabilize or even drop significantly per unit. This is where that learning curve really pays off, and economies of scale kick in properly. The manager's focus shifts here. It's less about can we make it, and more about can we make enough. Capacity management becomes key. Can we produce fast enough? Maintain quality under pressure?
And this is usually where the product breaks even on a cumulative basis.
Typically, yes. It starts generating real substantial net profit during the growth phase.
Which leads us, hopefully, to Act 4. Maturity, the sweet spot.
The ideal stage, yeah. Sales and profits peak. Product's basically a cash cow. Demand is stable. But it's not time for managers to just sit back and relax.
No, why not?
Far from it. This phase brings intense competition. Everyone sees your success and wants a piece of the pie. They try to copy you, undercut your price.
Right.
So managers have to fight tooth and nail to maintain those margins. They need relentless strategic cost control. Things like continuous improvement Kaizen or value engineering become absolutely critical to fight off that inevitable price pressure from the market.
So the goal here is really extending this phase, keeping the cash cow milking for as long as possible.
Absolutely. Extending maturity through maybe product variations, updates, new markets. That's the key to maximizing the total lifetime profit.
Okay. And then inevitably, Act 5, decline. Sales start to fall off.
Yeah, it happens to almost every product eventually. Technology moves on, customer tastes change. But crucially, the costs don't just magically vanish when you stop making the product.
Good point.
Exactly. This is where those often forgotten costs associated with withdrawing the product become really relevant. Things like dismantling specialized machinery, losses on selling off leftover inventory, handling warranty claims for products already sold, maybe severance pay for specialized workers. And often the most complex bit, cleanup costs, decommissioning, or maybe mandatory recycling costs, depending on the product and regulations.
And in our scenario, we estimated those end-of-life costs could be around, what, $30,000?
That was the estimate, yes. And these are precisely the costs that the short-term traditional accounting model almost always ignores until it's too late.
Let me just push back on that a little bit, on those Act 5 costs. Okay, estimating R&D costs upfront is hard enough, but estimating disposal costs for some specialized component, maybe 15 years down the road, when you don't know what the regulations or technology will be, that sounds like pure guesswork. How does LCC handle that level of uncertainty?
That's an excellent point and a necessary challenge. LCC absolutely acknowledges that uncertainty. It doesn't demand perfect crystal ball gazing. What it demands is rigorous estimation and provisioning. Management has to use tools like probability analysis, sensitivity analysis. For instance, they might estimate the disposal cost under 3 different scenarios, say high regulation, medium, low, and assign probabilities to each one.
So you build in the range of possibilities.
Exactly. And furthermore, think about the incentive structure. By being forced to estimate that disposal cost way back in Act 1 during development, management is immediately incentivized to choose a design that reduces that future uncertainty. If Design A uses some highly specialized, non-recyclable, nasty stuff, and Design B uses standard, easily reusable components, well, the higher estimated future cost for Design A makes it less attractive right from the start.
I see. So LCC acts preventatively.
Precisely. It forces you to make provision for that future liability now. It influences the design choices to mitigate future pain.
That makes a lot of sense. Better to have a maybe conservative estimated cost factored into your unit price from day one than to suddenly get hit with a massive unexpected cleanup bill years later that just tanks the product's actual lifetime profitability. And when you map this out visually, you contrast the sales revenue curve, which starts climbing nicely in introduction, with the profit curve.
Yeah.
Which lags way behind. That lag, that gap, that's the whole reason LCC exists, isn't it? It represents that cumulative loss from development and early introduction.
That lag is the physical, financial representation of that initial investment. If you just calculate profit in the first year of sales, you're looking at the product while it's still, digging itself out of that hole.
Right.
LCC helps managers mentally bridge that gap. It reframes that initial spending. It's not just an expense. It's a deferred cost, an investment that has to be recovered through sales later in the growth and maturity phases.
Okay, let's shift gears slightly. Let's talk about the core strategic use of LCC. This idea about the incredible leverage you get from making the right decisions early on. This concept of when costs are committed versus when they're actually incurred. That seems like the single most important idea to grasp for performance management.
Oh, it absolutely is. It's the bedrock of strategic cost management. Let's use an analogy. Think about building a skyscraper.
Okay.
When is the vast majority of the project's cost really determined? Is it when the final bricks are laid?
No, it's much earlier, right?
Yeah.
When the architect finishes the blueprints.
Exactly. It's in the design office. Once the architect specifies, say, high-grade steel beams instead of standard concrete, or decides on 50 floors instead of 30, the cost is largely set in stone.
Right.
Those design choices commit the project to buying those specific materials, hiring that type of workforce, using certain construction methods.
But the actual money hasn't been spent yet.
Not yet. That cost isn't incurred until maybe months or even years later, when the steel actually arrives on site and the invoices land on someone's desk. And studies consistently show this for products too. Somewhere between, say, 80% and maybe even 90% of a product's total lifetime cost is locked in or committed during those early stages design and development, Acts 1 and 2.
Even though you might have only actually spent maybe less than 5% of the total budget at that point?
That's the paradox.
Wow. So the time when you have the most power to influence the total cost is also the time when you're spending the least amount of actual cash. That's maximum financial leverage right there.
And think about the flip side. If you wait until Act 3, the growth phase, when manufacturing is humming along and then you try to make big cost reductions.
Too late.
Well, largely, yes. By then, the factory layout is fixed, the tooling is specific, the material specifications are locked in contracts. Your ability to cut significant costs is severely limited. You might be able to squeeze out minor operational efficiencies, maybe save 5 cents a unit by negotiating a slightly better delivery deal. But you can't save $1 per unit by, say, redesigning a major component out of existence entirely. That ship has sailed.
So LCC is fundamentally a system designed to force management to exploit that high leverage window, that moment of maximum influence in the design phase.
Precisely. To maximize the return over the entire product lifecycle.
Yeah.
And our strategic framework highlights 4 key management objectives that LCC really helps drive home.
Okay, what are they?
The first, and arguably the most critical, is to design costs out.
Right, because that's where the leverage is.
Exactly. Since up to 90% of the cost is committed during design, this is the prime time to eliminate cost drivers completely. This means R&D needs to work closely with finance, focusing on things like simplifying assembly, reducing the number or complexity of components, choosing cheaper but still effective materials, maybe designing for durability to cut down on future warranty claims.
Okay, designing costs out. What's number 2?
Number 2 is to minimize time to market, getting the product launched quickly.
And that's not just about keeping customers happy.
No, it's a hard financial imperative under LCC. Think about it. If your product development slips by 6 months, that's 6 months of lost sales revenue, potentially during the highly profitable growth and maturity phases. It pushes back your cumulative break-even point further into the future. Speed to market is directly linked to the overall financial health calculated by LCC.
Got it. Minimize time to market. Third objective.
Third, LCC helps us focus on minimizing the break-even time, often called BT.
Right, the point where cumulative profit turns positive.
Exactly, the critical metric. How quickly does this product go from burning cash to actually generating a net positive cumulative return? Managers need to track this very closely. A shorter bet reduces the overall financial risk of the whole venture. It makes the product look much more attractive to internal or external investors.
Makes sense. And the fourth objective?
Finally, number 4, maximize the length of the lifespan, especially that maturity phase.
Keep the cash cow going.
Precisely. We are explicitly trying to extend that profitable phase for as long as realistically possible. The longer it lasts, the more units you sell overall.
Right.
And the more units you sell, the further you spread those big fixed upfront costs from development and those back-end costs from decline. Spreading fixed costs over more units drives down the average life cycle cost per unit.
Okay, those 4 objectives make the strategy clear. Now, to really hammer home this idea of leveraging design spending, let's revisit that strategic example you mentioned earlier. This is where LCC moves from just being a concept to being like a mandatory financial tool.
Yeah, this really shows it in action. So imagine a company is planning a new product. They do their initial LCC analysis, estimate everything, and it comes out that the estimated total life cycle cost per unit is $7.80.
Okay, $7.80 per unit, cradle to grave.
But management has also done their homework on the market. They know the target selling price they can achieve, and they know the profit margin they need to make. And based on that, they calculate the maximum cost they can possibly afford. The target cost is only $7 per unit.
Uh-oh. So, right out of the gate, they've got an 80-cent cost gap per unit. The project looks like it's not viable as it stands. Traditional thinking might lead to panic, right? Maybe slashing manufacturing quality to save costs immediately.
That's often the knee-jerk reaction, yes, often with disastrous long-term consequences for quality and reputation. But LCC encourages a different approach, a strategic intervention back in Act 1 in development.
Okay.
Management has a crucial insight. They realize, hang on, maybe we could spend a bit more money right now up front. Let's say an additional fixed cost of $20,000.
More cost. How does that help?
Because they're going to spend it specifically on advanced design work, maybe some serious value engineering studies. The goal isn't just tiny tweaks, it's radical simplification. They want to fundamentally reduce the complexity, the material needed, the difficulty of actually manufacturing this thing later on.
Okay, so you're investing more upfront in design, hoping it pays off massively in lower production costs down the line.
Exactly. But we need to justify that extra $20,000 investment. We need to calculate precisely how much future saving that $20 K must generate per unit to close that 80-cent gap and make the whole project worthwhile.
Right. Let's crunch the numbers. How many units are we assuming over the whole life cycle?
Let's stick with the total estimated sales volume of 50,000 units.
Okay, 50,000 units total.
So first step, what's the total maximum allowable life cycle cost for the entire project? That's the 50,000 units multiplied by the target cost of $7 per unit.
50,000 times $7. That's $350,000. That's the absolute ceiling for all costs over the entire life cycle.
Correct. Now, we need to adjust our total fixed non-manufacturing costs to include that extra design investment. What were the original fixed costs?
We had $60,000 for the initial development.
Right.
We're adding $20,000 for this extra design effort.
Yep.
And we still have the estimated $30,000 for end-of-life costs.
Okay, so $60K plus $20K plus $30K. That gives us new, higher total fixed costs of $110,000. These are like the sunk investment costs for the project.
Right, $110,000 fixed.
Now comes the LCC strategic thinking. We take our maximum total allowable budget, that $350,000 ceiling, and we subtract these total fixed costs of $110,000.
$350,000 minus $110,000 leaves $240,000.
Exactly. $240,000 is the total amount remaining in the budget specifically for all the variable costs, primarily manufacturing, but also maybe some variable marketing or distribution over the entire life of those 50,000 units.
Okay, $240,000 left for variable costs across 50,000 units. So to find the maximum allowable variable cost per unit, we divide.
You got it. Divide that remaining $240,000 budget by the 50,000 units.
$240,000 divided by 50,000, that comes out to $4.80 per unit.
Bingo. That $4.80 is the new absolute maximum allowable manufacturing and variable cost per unit that the design improvements must achieve.
So it gives management a really precise target. If the original plan had manufacturing costs at, say, $6 per unit,
right,
they now know that this extra $20,000 design investment absolutely has to succeed in cutting that cost down by $1.20 per unit, from $6 down to $4.80.
Exactly. And you can see the leverage, that $1.20 saving per unit multiplied across the full 50,000 units.
$1.20 times 50,000, that's a $60,000 total saving in downstream costs.
$60,000 saved later, generated by spending an extra $20,000 up front.
Wow. So the initial $20K investment yields a return of 3 times its value. $60 savings, 20K cost. That's powerful proof. It shows why spending more in development isn't necessarily bad. It's often a crucial investment for long-term success.
It completely justifies treating that development budget as a strategic investment, not just an expense line item to be minimized at all costs.
And presumably management can't just hope they hit that $4.80 target. They need specific methods.
Absolutely. Hope is not a strategy here. They need formal tools to make sure that design investment actually delivers. Things like quality function deployment, QFD, which systematically links what customers want directly to specific design features, or formal value analysis and value engineering, VAVE, where teams systematically break down every process step, looking for ways to cut cost without sacrificing the function the customer actually needs.
Okay, that example makes the strategic value really clear. Let's talk now about how LCC fits into the day-to-day management accounting function. You mentioned earlier its close relationship with target costing. You said they're almost inseparable in modern strategic management.
Oh, absolutely. They work hand in glove. Think about traditional costing, often called cost plus is pricing.
Right. Figure out your cost, add a markup, that's your price.
Exactly. But that approach is completely disconnected from what the market might actually be willing to pay. It's internally focused, almost arrogant sometimes. LCC, when combined with target costing, flips that completely on its head. It's price minus profit determines your cost allowance.
So you start with the price the market will accept.
Precisely. Management has to start with the market reality. Let's use our example numbers again. Market research says the maximum acceptable selling price for this product is $10.50 per unit.
Okay. $10.50 is the ceiling from the customer's perspective.
Then management determines their required rate of return, their necessary profit margin. Let's say for this product line, they need a 50% markup on cost.
Okay, $10.50 price, 50% markup on cost needed. That forces the cost, doesn't it? If price cost plus 0.5 cost, then $10.50 equals 1.5 cost. So cost has to be $10.50 divided by 1.5, which is $7.
Exactly. That $7 becomes the target life cycle cost. It's the maximum average cost per unit across the entire life cycle that the company can afford if it wants to hit both its market price point and its required profit margin.
That is a powerful shift. The target cost isn't something you calculate after the fact. It's a constraint, a budget set right at the beginning, driven by the market.
It's a proactive constraint. And LCC provides the framework to actually check if meeting that constraint is feasible over the long term. You compare your estimated actual average life cycle cost, which was $7.80 initially in our example, but hopefully gets down to $7 after the design changes. You compare that against the mandated target cost of $7.
And that comparison estimated actual LCC versus target LCC that gives you the critical gonna-go decision.
It's a primary financial justification, yes.
Yeah.
It forces that tough investment appraisal decision right at the start, in the development stage, long before you've sunk millions into tooling, manufacturing lines, and inventory.
So back to the numbers. We calculated the initial estimated total life cycle costs, R&D, manufacturing, disposal, everything came to $390,000 total. Divided by 50,000 units, that gave $7.80 per unit.
Right.
Comparing that $7.80 estimate against the $7 target cost tells the manager immediately, warning, unless we find a way to close that 80-cent gap per unit, this project will destroy value, not create it. The decision is data-driven and happens early.
It prevents throwing good money after bad.
Now, beyond just that basic viability check, LCC provides the framework for a more sophisticated investment decision too, right? Traditional methods often stumble here. I'm thinking particularly about the time value of money. We're talking about costs and revenues spread over potentially many years. Shouldn't we be discounting them?
You've hit on a crucial technical point, especially important for ACCA PM students.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. For a truly rigorous investment appraisal, the costs and revenues identified by the LCC structure need to be treated as cash flows.
Okay.
And those cash flows, occurring at different points in time, absolutely must be discounted back to the present value, PV. LCC provides the essential structure, the timing and amounts of inflows and outflows over the whole life cycle that you need to perform a proper discounted cash flow DCF analysis.
Typically using net present value, NPV.
NPV is the most common and generally preferred method, yes. LCC helps you lay out all the relevant cash flows year by year. For example, that $30,000 disposal cost we estimated for Act 5, let's say it occurs 10 years from now.
Right.
From an NPV perspective, that's not worth $30,000 today. It's worth much less when discounted back. LCC forces the manager to estimate the timing of all significant costs and benefits, apply an appropriate discount rate, like the company's cost of capital, and calculate the overall NPV for the entire product lifecycle.
So even if the simple average LCC meets the target cost, if the NPV is negative,
The project should still be rejected. A negative NPV means it doesn't generate a return sufficient to cover the cost of the capital invested, considering the timing of the flows. LCC ensures that long-term investment decisions are financially robust by properly integrating the time value of money.
that really highlights the challenge of accurate forecasting, though. Separating out fixed and variable life cycle costs, predicting sales volumes and timings over maybe a decade, that must be incredibly difficult in practice. How do managers actually tackle allocating costs that span so many different reporting periods?
It absolutely is difficult, no question. And it requires specialized tracking systems and, frankly, a different mindset than traditional period accounting. You have to categorize costs differently. Development, Act 1, and disposal, Act 5, tend to be dominated by large, fixed, non-recurring costs.
Okay.
Whereas manufacturing, marketing, distribution, Acts 2, 3, and 4, those are typically dominated by variable costs, things that fluctuate with production and sales volume.
Right.
LCC necessitates cross-functional cost collection and cooperation. R&D has to provide reliable estimates for Act 1 costs and timings. Marketing needs to provide realistic volume forecasts and promotional budgets for the middle acts. And any crucial input may be from environmental health and safety or legal departments to forecast those complex Act 5 costs.
So organizational silos are the enemy of LCC.
They're fatal to it. If the company's internal data systems and culture prevent sharing this information across departments and across time, LCC simply won't work effectively. It really requires a cultural shift towards integrated data and shared responsibility for the product's entire life.
One huge benefit you touched on earlier is that LCC forces managers to look beyond just the manufacturing costs, the stuff they're usually really good at tracking, and focus on those costs at the beginning and end that traditional accounting often sweeps under the rug.
Yes, exactly. The costs at the extreme ends of the life cycle, R&D design upfront, and disposal end of life at the back end, are often ignored in short-term P&L reporting because they don't neatly fit into a single accounting period's results.
How are they usually treated?
Well, R&D costs are often either capitalized as an intangible asset and amortized over some arbitrary period, or simply treated as a period expense in the year they're incurred. Neither method properly links the cost to the specific unit sold over the product's actual life.
Right.
And those end-of-life costs. They're often completely ignored until the year they actually hit the cash flow, sometimes long after the product stopped generating revenue.
And forgetting those costs creates a false sense of profitability during the product's selling years.
Absolutely. If a company spends, say, $2 million on R&D, sells the product successfully for 5 years, making good margins based on manufacturing cost alone, but then faces a mandatory $5 million cleanup cost in year 8.
What?
Right. The product looked highly profitable for 5 years, but the true picture, revealed only later, might be a significant overall loss. LCC prevents this by ensuring that the average lifetime cost per unit includes a fair share, an estimate of that eventual cleanup bill right from the very beginning. It provides a much more honest picture.
This strategic, holistic view seems to lead naturally into the connection between life cycle costing and other modern strategic goals, particularly around sustainability and environmental management accounting, or EMA.
It's a perfect marriage, really. LCC provides the ideal financial framework for driving corporate sustainability initiatives. EMA is all about identifying, tracking, and managing costs that are specifically driven by environmental factors.
Like what kind of costs?
Costs related to resource consumption, energy, water, raw materials, costs of managing waste and emissions pollution control equipment, waste disposal fees, carbon taxes, and costs of complying with environmental regulations.
Right.
Now, if a company only tracks its waste disposal fees in Act 3 growth when production is high, well, they're just reacting to a problem. They're measuring the cost of waste they've already created.
Right. Too late to prevent it.
Exactly. LCC, combined with EMA principles, demands that these environmentally driven costs are estimated and included way back in Act 1 during the design phase.
And that gives you the sustainability advantage, the chance to actually design out those environmental costs before they even happen.
Precisely. It transforms sustainability from just being, a nice-to-have marketing slogan into a core financial savings opportunity.
Can you give an example?
Sure. Think about a tech company designing a new type of battery. Using traditional costing, they might only focus on the purchase price of the raw materials, lithium, cobalt, whatever.
Right.
But using LCCHIMA, They must also estimate and account for the potential future costs of recycling that battery at the end of its life. Maybe there's a predicted regulatory fee of, say, 50 cents per battery that will have to be paid in Act 5.
Okay, so that 50-cent future cost gets factored in now.
Yes. It gets included in the total life cycle cost calculation right from the start. And suddenly, that changes the design incentives. Management might now be willing to invest a bit more in R&D to find a design modification, maybe using a slightly more expensive initial material that's much easier and cheaper to recover or recycle later.
Because the long-term saving from avoiding or reducing that 50-cent disposal fee outweighs the small increase in upfront material cost.
Exactly. The long-term financial saving justifies the short-term design investment. You shift from just reactive compliance, oh dear, we have to pay this recycling fee, to proactive environmental and financial efficiency. Let's design this thing so recycling is cheap or unnecessary.
So what other environmental costs are managers trying to design out using this approach?
All sorts. Things like reducing the sheer volume of scrap or waste generated during the manufacturing process itself. Avoiding the use of hazardous or non-recyclable materials in the first place. Designing the product to consume less energy or water during its use phase that might impact the customer directly, but it's a competitive factor. Or designing for simpler disassembly, which reduces transport costs and maintenance costs over the life cycle.
And the neat thing here is that resource efficiency and financial efficiency become basically the same goal, right?
They align perfectly. Using less paper, consuming less water, generating less scrap material, these actions don't just help the environment or make the company look good in a sustainability report. They directly lower the tangible, calculated life cycle cost per unit.
Which increases the chance of hitting that all-important target cost.
Precisely. Look at the car industry. LCC is absolutely essential there. The upfront R&D costs for designing, say, a new electric vehicle are enormous, huge fixed costs in Act 1. But the long-term costs, like the energy efficiency for the consumer, the cost of replacing the battery pack years down the line, and especially the mandatory battery recycling or disposal costs in Act 5, these are absolutely crucial for determining the viable market price and hitting the target cost. LCC forces manufacturers to think hard about minimizing those Act 5 costs right from the design stage, simply to make the huge Act 1 investment financially viable.
So, wrapping it up, LCC ensures management is assessing the true long-term value and viability. It integrates not just the immediate financial numbers, but also environmental responsibility and those crucial multi-period strategic market goals. It really sounds like the ultimate holistic tool for a truly strategic manager. Okay, let's try and quickly synthesize the absolute must-know takeaways for our performance management students listening in. We kicked off by highlighting the big flaw in traditional short-term costing, how focusing only on one period can seriously mislead management about long-term profitability, especially with those big upfront development costs.
Yeah, that initial phase looks like a loss, but it's an investment. Then we walk through the typical 5 acts of a product's life: development, introduction, growth, maturity, and decline. We stressed the high fixed costs early on in Act 1, and those tricky, often uncertain but unavoidable costs at the very end in Act 5. And we explained why that profit curve always has to lag behind the sales curve because of that initial investment hole.
Then, crucially, we zeroed in on where managers have the most power that design phase, where maybe up to 90% of total costs are committed, locked in, even if the money hasn't been spent yet. That distinction forces the strategy. Design costs out early. We saw with the example how spending an extra $20,000 upfront on design could potentially generate $60,000 in downstream savings, easily justifying that early expense.
And we showed how LCC provides the essential backbone for sophisticated investment appraisal. By calculating that total life cycle cost per unit, it feeds directly into the target costing process. Market price minus required profit equals your maximum allowable target life cycle cost. And importantly, LCC structures all the cash flows over time, which is essential for doing a proper net present value analysis, bringing in the time value of money for a robust go-no-go decision.
And finally, we tied LCC directly to environmental management accounting. We saw how including potential future environmental costs like recycling fees or cleanup right into the act. One design budget creates a powerful financial incentive for companies to design for resource efficiency, leading to wins for both the bottom line and the planet.
Absolutely. LCC gives managers that strategic, holistic roadmap. It forces them to manage profitability over the entire journey, viewing the product as a complete multi-year venture. It really shifts their perspective, doesn't it? From just being a short-term cost controller to becoming a long-term value strategist.
And maybe that leads to a final thought for you, the listener, to kind of chew on. something that connects this accounting technique back to pure business strategy. LCC really forces managers to adopt the mindset of an entrepreneur launching a new venture.
That's a great way to put it. In any genuinely new business or product launch, there's almost always an initial period of loss during development and startup. That's expected. It's seen as a necessary, calculated, sunk investment.
Right, the cost of entry.
Exactly. And if the life cycle costing calculation has been done properly, if it shows that the product can eventually meet its target cost and generate a positive NPV, then that initial loss isn't a sign of failure. It's not about missing some arbitrary short-term budget.
It's what then?
It's the premium you pay, the investment you make, to hopefully earn significant profits later in the growth and maturity phases, maybe even enjoying a temporary monopoly. But LCC provides the hard financial evidence, the validated target cost, the positive NPV that confirms the leap of faith taken during development is actually grounded in rigorous whole-life financial planning. It's the critical metric that turns entrepreneurial hope into a credible, fundable business case.
If this helped you get a clear picture of life cycle costing, make sure you subscribe to the SmartPass YouTube channel. We've got more ACCA performance management lessons and audio guides waiting for you.